Catholics, the Vatican, and the Iscariots. We were fighting against the forces of darkness centuries before the Helsing organization even existed. Violence is never the right answer, except when used against heathens and monsters. If a vampire wants to eat some Protestants, how's it our business?
Just remember, we are part of God's divine instrument on earth. We do not retreat when we are challenged by heretics.
If anyone does not love the Lord Jesus Christ, let him be accursed at his coming. God save you from your fate. Amen.
Sir, a report from our Vatican intelligence officer. It reads, our fears confirmed. The Vatican Special Operations Iscariot organization is on the move.
Iscariot. The Vatican's Special Operations Unit. The most powerful agents the Vatican commands. What's your business here, Paladin of Iscariot, Father Alexander Anderson? Enough, Father Anderson. This is a violation of our agreement. The situation here is under our control. Withdraw immediately. Neither the Iscariot nor the Helsing organization can afford this sort of battle. I don't care who you think you are. This act of aggression ends now.
Withdraw? Is that an order? Did you really expect me to run away screaming in fear from a filthy Protestant whore?
He has violated our agreements, attacked without provocation, and killed my men. The Vatican will pay dearly for this.
I'll leave. I need further preparation to kill this one. We'll meet again, Helsing. Next time, I'll butcher you all.
That was an excerpt of a Japanese anime called Helsing, about a British Protestant organization that protects the British Isles against goblins, ghouls, and vampires. But they are double-crossed by their ally, the Vatican. Though it is fictitious, it lays a little groundwork for this study. I'm doing a project online called The Two Kingdoms, based upon two systems in Revelation chapter 13, which are going to rob the entire world of their freedom. And today's study is just an introduction to the first kingdom. Please watch, because if you want to know what power you're going to be up against if you make a stand, it's better that you observe what you see next. The chameleon is a reptile that has been classed as a type of a lizard, which is known for its stereoscopic eyes. And what makes it unique among all the different species is its ability to camouflage itself when it feels threatened, where it can instantly change color and adapt to its surroundings in order to avoid all levels of detection. The Papacy is a chameleon-like system. It can camouflage itself very skillfully using its missionary adaptation technique in order to throw off the scent for those who detect her global ambitions and her future plans. She can climatize herself to the popular trends of the day, and one of the most popular attractions is sport. Football, also known as soccer, is the most watched sport and the most popular game in the world. It can be traced to 32nd century BC China, to a game called Suju or Kuju. It was revived in England with the founding of the Football Association in 1863, where it became a recreation for workers who were attracted to the city during the Industrial Revolution. It is a religion and a badge of identity to many of its fans, and the Vatican has taken advantage of its global mass appeal. Brazil has produced some of the most entertaining players, and its famous stars like Ronaldo. When he was in his prime as a youngster, he visited the late Pope John Paul II during a private audience in the Vatican, presenting the Pope with both his Inter Milan and Brazilian shirt, giving the Pope a youthful appeal. Edson Arantes do Nascimento, better known as Pelé, has been regarded as the greatest footballer of all time, who still is the most successful league scorer in the world. He kissed Pope Benedict XVI's hand on August 20, 2005 in Cologne, Germany, and was granted a papal blessing by the pontiff. The same pope also met the Italian team Inter Milan during a weekly audience at the Vatican on May 7, 2008. Joseph Sepp Blatter is a Swiss football administrator who serves as the 8th and current president of FIFA, the Federation International of Football Association, which is responsible for organizing all of football's major international tournaments. He met Pope Francis I in the Vatican on Friday, November 22, 2013, in a private audience and presented him with a football jersey with the Pope's personal name inscribed on the back, where they discussed the 2014 World Cup in Brazil, for the Pope is known as a keen football fan. Carlos Tevez is an Argentine footballer who currently plays for the Italian club Juventus and previously played for the English teams West Ham United, Manchester City and Manchester United. On the 12th of November 2013, Tevez and his family met the Pope in the Vatican in a private audience and presented the Pope with a football jersey with his name on it. They are both from Buenos Aires in Argentina. Italian goalkeeper Gianluigi Buffon also plays for the Italian club Juventus and is considered to be one of the greatest goalkeepers of all time. And Lionel Messi is an Argentine footballer who plays for the Argentine national team as well as the Spanish team Barcelona. Mario Balotelli is the Italian footballer famous for sporting the Mohawk, who plays for the Italian national team as well as a striker for Italian team AC Milan. During a friendly match between Argentina and Italy, its players like Mario Balotelli, Lionel Messi, and Gianluigi Buffon had, on the 13th of August 2013, received a papal blessing from the Pope in the Vatican, where the players all enjoyed a photo op with the Pope. The last player is Argentine footballer Javier Aldemar Zanetti, who plays for Italian football club Inter Milan and is considered as the world's best player. He also met Pope Francis I, a fellow Argentinian, in an hour-long private audience at the Vatican on Thursday, April 25, 2013. While all of these players do come from predominantly Roman Catholic countries, if you are rubbing shoulders with some of the most popular sportsmen on the planet, then you will definitely win over people's sympathy and you will definitely break down people's hostility towards you, as sport is the most powerful inroad into the hearts of a postmodern world.
El Señor hoy los llama, a vos, a vos, a vos, a vos, a cada uno. Nos pide que seamos sus discípulos, que juguemos en su equipo. Nunca estamos solos, en las buenas y en las malas. Sé que ustedes apuntan a lo alto. No les tengas miedo. Los cariocas saben recibir bien. Esos cristianos son pura facha. Pensé en 3 imágenes. 3. Ustedes son los que tienen el futuro. Quiero que se salga afuera. Cuiden los extremos. Que acá adentro va a haber lío, va a haber. Que acá en el río va a haber lío, va a haber. Pero lío. Sean protagonistas. Jueguen para adelante. Pateen adelante. El Papa está con vosotros.
Brazil is a multicultural society that has the largest Roman Catholic population on earth, and it is known for its favelas, carnival, and football. It is not only hosting the 2014 World Cup, but it is also hosting the 2016 Olympics, that will draw crowds from all over the world. When Pope Francis I went to Brazil in July 2013 to counteract the growth of evangelicals in Latin America, he blessed both the Olympic and Paralympic flag with so-called holy water. And in the Vatican, he met Thomas Bach, the current president of the Olympic Committee, in November 2013, where the Pope was given the Olympic Order in gold as a gift. This is the level of clout and respectability the Vatican has in the field of sport. But it is not just in sport where her respectability and her influence is felt. Harley-Davidson is an American motorcycle company that has a total revenue of $5.31 billion as of 2011. The men who are famous for riding them are the infamous Hells Angels gang. It was founded in 1903 by the Davidson brothers, but the name was branded after its co-founders, Arthur Davidson, second from right, and William S. Harley on the furthest right. William Godfrey Davidson is an American businessman, motorcycle designer, and the former senior vice president and chief styling officer of Harley-Davidson. He is the grandson of William A. Davidson, who stands on the furthest left, and he brought the company from facing bankruptcy, where he has been inducted into AMA Motorcycle Museum's Hall of Fame in 1999. On April 2012, William G. Davidson met Pope Benedict XVI in the Vatican, where he presented 2 commemorative motorcycle tanks to the Pope for a blessing, where they were signed by both Benedict XVI and William G. Davidson in preparation for the 110th anniversary of Harley-Davidson, which was to be celebrated in Rome the following year in June 2013, where tens of thousands of riders and fans from all over the globe made their way to Rome, where Pope Francis I pronounced a papal blessing on the Harley-Davidson bikers who were in Rome. When a secular biking organization goes to the Vatican for a blessing, this should be a wake-up call for those who underestimate her global mass appeal. Over the years, many of the top motor vehicle companies in Europe have either had a private audience in the Vatican or have given the popes a collection of specially made cars for free. Let us take a look at them. Jean-Claude Van Damme was famous in the 1990s for his martial arts roles and is trying to rebuild his career back. And he is famous for doing the splits, as this promotional ad shows, for the motor vehicle company Volvo. And this is one of the companies who provides tailor-made cars for the Pope for free, as can be seen in this kitted out car for Benedict XVI. Ferdinand Porsche invented Volkswagen, the people's car for Nazi Germany, as an automobile for the family. And the French family Louis Marcel and Ferdinand Renault founded the French manufacturing company Renault in 1899, which is the 3rd biggest European automaker by production. The former chairman of Volkswagen and a German automobile engineer and manager, Dr. Bernd Peter Pischreider, standing on the right, presents Pope Benedict XVI on the left with an armored LWB W12 Phaeton at the Vatican on the 18th of October 2006. Carlos Ghosn is a French-Lebanese Brazilian who is the chair and CEO of both Renault and Nissan, bowed to Pope Benedict XVI and gave him for free a customized electric car, a white Renault Kangoo, to patrol the gardens of the papal summer residence at Castel Gandolfo. German manufacturer Daimler AG produces the automobile Mercedes-Benz, one of the best-selling automobile makers in the world. Its chairman and CEO is Dieter Zetscher, and like all the other automobile companies previously mentioned, he hands the keys over to Pope Francis I for his own tailor-made vehicle. The Mercedes-Benz has been providing vehicles for the trips and for official appearances of the head of the Catholic Church for more than 80 years, being the first automobile maker to do so when Pope Pius XI became the first pope to use a vehicle, where he had his own garage of cars and carriages provided for him for free. But it is not just automakers. The Vatican is deeply involved in the field of finance, working with many of the major financial institutions on earth, especially in the field of banking. You may wonder why, the year before the launch of the single currency, the euro, that when Barclays Bank advertised it on one of their booklets, there is an image of Vatican City. Why? Thomas J. Rees is an American Jesuit priest and senior analyst for the National Catholic Reporter. And in 1997, he wrote a book titled Inside the Vatican, where he gives an account of how deeply she is involved in the field of international finance, where he quotes from a Monsignor. Anyone of any size in the business would like to have an account with the Vatican. As a result of this, we can pick brains from all across the world and get very good investment advice. In purchasing stocks and bonds, we deal with all the major investment houses in the world. Merrill Lynch in the States, Barclays Bank in London, Nomura in Japan. While many may be shocked at this statement, those who study prophecy knows that this is exactly how God described her, where the merchants of the earth are waxed rich to the abundance of her delicacies. This chameleon can adapt to any environment without people detecting her true motives. There is a divine formula for truly understanding the papal system. Number one, you need to seek God. Afterwards, you need to humble yourself. After humility comes prayer. Then with prayer, your mind will be open to study, and then you will hear the voice of God. So with the postmodern world distracted with the celebrity worship of competitive sport, and with the pomp and pageantry of a pope who embraces these sports stars in the Vatican, what are her global plans, and how will she be able to execute them without being exposed beforehand? One of the prophecies foretells us that, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. And how exactly does someone become deceived? According to Virtue's English Dictionary, to deceive means to mislead the mind, especially intentionally. To cause to believe what is false or disbelieve what is true. To delude. And as the secular mind does not believe in the Bible, and as many Christians don't study the Bible and its content to spiritually strengthen their inwards and to give them discernment, as the 19th century scholar J.A. Wiley tells us, she openly blasphemed throughout the conduct of her entire system, but very few can discern. Popery is the counterfeit of Christianity. This church has, moreover, its Bible, which is tradition, which blasphemes the word of God by virtually teaching its insufficiency. It has its mediators, saints and angels, and especially the Virgin, and thus it blasphemes the one mediator between God and man. In fine, it blasphemes the person and the office of the Spirit as the sanctifier, because it teaches that its sacraments can make holy, and it blasphemes God by teaching that its priests can pardon sin and can release from the obligations of divine law. Thus has popery counterfeited and, by counterfeiting, set aside all that is vital and valuable in Christianity. It robs Christ of his kingly office by exalting the Pope to his throne. It robs him of his priesthood in the sacrifice of the Mass, and it robs God the Father of his prerogatives by assuming the power of justifying and pardoning sin. We can trace a purgatory nowhere but in the writings of the pagan philosophers and poets. The great father of poetry makes some not very obscure allusions to such a place. Plato believed in a middle state. It formed one of the compartments of Virgil's Elysium, and there souls were purified by their own sufferings and the sacrifice of their friends on earth before entering the habitation of joy. From this source did the Roman Catholic Church borrow her purgatory. Plato, the 5th century BC Greek philosopher and student of Socrates, is the father of Western philosophy, and his ideas were picked up in pagan Rome by the famous poet Virgil in the Augustan period, who was famous for the epic, the Aeneid. And one of the reasons for the Augustinian monk turned reformer Martin Luther nailing the 95 Theses to the castle church of Wittenberg in Germany on the 31st of October 1517 that catapulted the already growing Protestant Reformation was because of the sale of indulgences. And when Pope Leo X ordered Luther to renounce his stand against the papacy, Luther openly burnt Pope Leo X's request and also labelled him with the prophetic description of the leader of the apostate church in the book of John, the Antichrist. Indulgences was a profit-making tool craftily set up by the Catholic Church where people could buy their way out of the pagan incorporated purgatory, and the Catholic Church disgustingly grew economically fat out of people's guilt. It quieted down during the Reformation, but thanks to the 17th century German Jesuit priest and occultist Athanasius Kircher, the Platonic teachings of purgatory was restored via his magic lantern show, the forerunner to motion pictures, and the Jesuits created an atmosphere of fear through special effects, which the French investigative journalist Edmond Paris recorded in his thesis on the Jesuits on how they accomplished this. No need to say that hell has the prominent part in that magic lantern show, with its lake of fire into which the damned are thrown, the awful concert of screams, the atrocious stench of sulphur and burning flesh. While many may think that purgatory is isolated to the Dark Ages, you only need to look at the comic books of our day, and this revived Platonic papal teaching has penetrated into a genre which was once seen as an escapism for geeks and nerds. But comic books are now turning into multi-billion blockbuster movies. Rome injects her poisonous ideology everywhere, and most can't see it, for she works in stealth mode. But even comics can reveal Rome's plans on how she works. In the first edition of the comic, The Magdalena, about a female heroine who acts as a warrior in defense of the Catholic Church, there is a good insight into things your average person would think is absurd, for they only see one side of this chameleon, but as you open the comic, it reveals her true side. It reads, "In the 2,000 years of its existence, the Church has gone from a few intensely impoverished strugglers who wander the countryside preaching peace and love and goodwill toward men, to a mighty institution with great wealth and power, with millions of followers worldwide. With a vast amount of resources available to the Church, very little can happen without its knowledge, though most of the information it gathers is kept hidden from the public." This is in a comic. And for those who think that was a one-off wild statement, those who operate in diplomatic circles knows exactly how she operates, for she not only covertly works with a high number of militia groups that instigates wars and sets off bombs, she knows more what goes on in the world than people think, as The Economist magazine confirms. The Roman Catholic Church alone among faiths is a diplomatic player. Over the past century, despite the march of secularism, the Vatican's role in world affairs has expanded. Obed Ben-Hur, Israel's envoy to the Holy See, adds that its diplomatic service is just like any foreign service, with different people having different abilities. But they have an advantage. They are highly cultured, they know languages, they know history. They are very well informed. A former papal envoy to a war-torn nations tells with pride how the American embassy would send a diplomat each morning to ask him about the war zones, knowing the Pope's man would have been fully briefed by local nuns. Carla Del Ponte is an outspoken Swiss attorney who is currently a member of the Independent International Commission on the Syrian Arabic Republic under the auspices of the United Nations High Commission for Human Rights. When she was the former chief prosecutor of 2 United Nations International Criminal Law Tribunals, she accused the Catholic Church of harboring a Croatian war criminal, Ante Gotovina, and she also received a number of death threats from the Albanian mafia, where she was silently removed from office. In a 2005 interview with the London Daily Telegraph, it said, "The United Nations Chief Prosecutor to former Yugoslavia, Carla Del Ponte, said, 'As a Roman Catholic, I think that the Catholic Church has the most advanced intelligence services.'" In Knightsbridge in London, England, is one of the most famous shops in the world, Harrods. But just a stone's throw away is the Ecuadorian embassy, and inside of there a man is hiding with diplomatic protection. An Australian publisher and journalist, Julian Assange, who is the editor-in-chief and spokesman for WikiLeaks, an international online non-profit organization that publishes secret information and classified reports that you won't get in mainstream media. It became famous in 2010 and 2011 for releasing US State Department's diplomatic cables, but it revealed information that the late Italian-American Catholic investigative journalist Nino Labello was already saying in the early 1980s in his book, The Vatican Papers. If there's one clear conclusion that can be drawn from the recent Vatican-related disclosures, it's that the United States takes the Vatican and its diplomatic activity very seriously. The Vatican is only second to the United States in the number of countries which it enjoys diplomatic relations, and there are Catholic priests, nuns, and lay people in every country on the planet. As a result, the Holy See is interested and well informed about developments all over the globe, it said. The WikiLeaks cables often reveal US diplomats as trying very hard to figure out the Vatican as they deal with an institution that is both a sovereign state and the center of a global religion. So the billion-dollar military budget of the US military, which uses both SIGINT, signals intelligence, and HUMINT, human intelligence by the NSA, CIA, and the FBI, Britain's Joint Intelligence Committee that deals with defense intelligence overseen by GCHQ, the Secret Service, which is MI5, and the Secret Intelligence Service, which is MI6, the Federal Security Service of the Russian Federation, the FSB, that succeeded the KGB, and the Israeli Defense Forces Shin Bet, Amman, and Mossad, from the most reliable sources in intelligence and diplomatic services, are no match for the global intelligence apparatus of the papacy. But this chameleon operates in the shadows, and the Jesuit Thomas J. Rees verifies this, where he gives you a brief look inside the Vatican.
Despite the importance of the papacy for the Catholic Church and its prominent role in international affairs, its internal workings are little known to Catholics, to world leaders, or to the world at large. This is partly as a result of the secretive nature of the Vatican, which sees little advantage to letting others know its internal operations. The Holy See is a unique organization because it pursues spiritual and secular goals at an international level. Its organizational complexity arises from the fact that the Pope plays many roles in order to fulfill these goals. He is the Bishop of Rome, the sovereign ruler of the state of Vatican City, and successor of St. Peter as head of the College of Bishops. As a monarch of Vatican City, a 108.7-acre independent state with fewer than 500 citizens, the Pope is a civil chief of state like any other monarch of a small state recognized under international law. So this Jesuit makes it unequivocally clear that Catholics have no idea how the government of the papacy, known as the Holy See, works, and to set the record straight, a pope is not a successor of Peter, but Caesar. And from both the WikiLeaks cables and Thomas J. Rees, the pope is both a king and a bishop, and the papacy is both a political and religious power in one. And for those who still follow the historicist school of prophetic interpretation from the Reformation, that is exactly how the Holy Scriptures prophetically describes her. The prophet Daniel describes her as a beast, which symbolically is interpreted as a kingdom or a political power in Daniel 7 verses 17 and 23. Paul describes her as a religious power, an apostate church or woman in 2 Thessalonians chapter 1. The Apostle John takes from both Daniel and Paul and shows that it is an amalgamation of a woman riding a beast in Revelation chapter 17 and verse 3, or a religio-political power that is embraced by all world leaders. And this is how all true Bible believers have identified her as. But what are her plans? Is it absurd or naive to think that she has a plan to take over the entire planet? Would you be a conspiracy theorist to think she has plans to control the 7 billion souls that make up the world's population? To be fair to the papacy, we will quote from her own words. The late Malachi Brandon Martin was an Irish-born American priest, a former Jesuit and professor at the Vatican's Pontifical Institute. He was a Vatican insider and intelligence expert. He wrote a book that was over 700 pages titled The Keys of His Blood that was published in 1990, and you get an insight into the papacy's plans. Willing or not, ready or not, we are all involved in an all-out, no-holds-barred, three-way global competition. Most of us are not competitors, however. We are the stakes. For the competition is about who will establish the first one-world system of government that has ever existed in the Society of Nations. It is about who will hold and wield the dual power and authority and control over each of us as individuals and over all of us together as a community. The competition is all out because now that it has started, there is no way it can be reversed or called off. No one can be exempted from its effects. No sector of our lives will remain untouched. As to the time factor involved, those of us who are under 70 will see at least the basic structures of the New World Government installed. Those of us under 40 will surely live under its legislative, executive and judiciary authority and control. Is your average person in the least aware that we are already living in the structure of the New World Order? Do they know that as freedoms are being stripped daily since 9/11, governments have more power and there is nothing you can do? Malachi Martin makes it clear who want to control it. What captures the unwavering attention of the secular leaders of the world in this remarkable network of the Roman Catholic Church is precisely the fact that it places at the personal disposal of the Pope a supranational, supercontinental, super trade bloc structure that is so built and oriented that if tomorrow or next week, by a sudden miracle, a one world government were established, the Church would not have to undergo any essential structural change in order to retain its dominant position and to further its global aims. For in the final analysis, John Paul II, as the claimant vicar of Christ, does claim to be the ultimate court of judgment on the society of states as a society. At his most specific, however, he insists that men have no reliable hope of creating a viable geopolitical system unless it is on the basis of Roman Catholic Christianity. The Emerald Isle, Ireland, should be an object lesson of a society totally under clerical control.
So why are you here? If all the trouble's over in England, then surely the English can take care of it on their own.
But it's not only in England.
What?
There's been an attack in Ireland. Northern Ireland. A little town called Badrick. Helsing is on the move, and we will not just sit back and watch.
The nerve of them, sneaking around where they're not wanted, like they belong there. These fools are as shameless and presumptuous as ever.
We will teach them to know their place, Anderson. They tread on Catholic land.
The Irish, the Murphys, the McCanns, the McCarthys, O'Learys, O'Sullivans and O'Briens were once the most Catholic race on earth, more Catholic than the Italians and Latinos combined, and as previously shown, their entire life, including their terrorism, was guided by the Catholic clergy. An Irish Catholic lawyer, Michael McCarthy, published a book in 1902 titled Priests and People of Ireland, and said that the Irish's biggest problems, their illiteracy, drunkenness, and high crime rate, was not surprisingly as a result of the colonialism of the English, but as a result of the bureaucratic celibate Irish Catholic clergy and their system of priestcraft that ruled the majority of the Irish with an iron fist. After the Second World War, when the Irish looked for places to rent in England, they were rejected. Why? During the First World War, the Irish rejected conscription, that is, fighting for the British against Germany. But what is not so known from this poster, it was the Irish clergy that instigated the Irish Catholics' hostility towards conscription, led by Cardinal Michael Logue, Archbishop of Armagh and Primate of all Ireland. And it was later discovered, as recorded in the Irish press in 1933, that Pope Benedict XV secretly blessed the men of the Easter Uprising in 1916. But with the recent exposés of child molestations, and with the last Pope, Benedict XVI, being the chief instigator of covering up the sexual abuses while a cardinal and as a pope, the Irish Independent in 2009 produced a very interesting article on what it is like to live in a clerical controlled nation under papal rule. The political power of the Catholic Church, with the support of the vast majority of the Irish people, was one of the defining features of Irish life. Anyone who did anything to diminish the status of the Church or made allegations against its clergy would have been ruined in the courts. Up until relatively recently, it was not possible to tell the truth. That was Ireland. We were a backward, introverted, unenlightened, superstitious society. We beatified and conferred power on the unelected. Irish society, through the melancholy convulsions of Irish history, was intellectually barren, conformist, and timid. We have now flipped that society on its head, and we have a new conformism with another priesthood in place of the old one. A left liberal dogmatic secularism now prevails, especially in our schools of journalism, and in most of its manifestations it is as intolerant as that which it has supplanted. So Ireland should be an object lesson to the entire world that a society or planet controlled and governed by the papacy brings total ruin to innocent souls. And when many have tried to forewarn and make light of this, they've been either pressured to keep quiet, silenced, or killed. Herbert G. Wells was a eugenicist, science fiction writer, better known for introducing the modern world to Martians. In one of his last books written, titled Crux and Satyr, which boldly documented the Vatican support of the fascist states during the Second World War, the manuscript was rejected by half a dozen of the biggest publishers in Britain before it was eventually published by Penguin. His younger protege, Avro Manhattan, was educated in the London School of Economics and worked for British intelligence during the Second World War. He also wrote a book similar to H.G. Wells called The Vatican in World Politics. It was rejected by 54 publishers in both the United States and Britain for fear of a backlash by the Catholic Church. But in 1949, it later was published and became one of the world's best sellers, having 47 editions. Manhattan has been unfairly categorized under anti-Catholicism on Wikipedia, which shows that his books are still a sore to the Church of Rome. For when he wrote The Dollar and the Vatican, dealing with the United States economic corporate power and its connection to the Vatican, the British newspaper The Times, Friday, November 15, 1957, documented that in Australia it was categorized as prohibited literature as a result of the clerical control over the Australian government. But not even those in the Vatican or connected to her are safe. And during the late 1970s and early 1980s, a string of deaths occurred that stretched from Rome to London, England, of individuals who attempted to expose the dark, corrupt inner workings of the papal system. David Yallop is an English writer regarded as the world's leading investigative journalist. He published a book in 1984 on a request from insiders in the Vatican titled In God's Name that has sold 6 million copies worldwide and was atop of the bestsellers list all over the world, that covers a chain of corruption that linked leading figures in financial, political, criminal and clerical circles. It covers the murder or death of Albino Luciani, who was better known as Pope John Paul I. Luciani was a Catholic bishop, disliked the Vatican, and when he became Pope, unlike the smokescreen of the present Pope Francis I, he made it known that he was going to purge corruption at the Vatican Bank that was entangled to the Vatican. Vatican officials hated and scorned him, for he didn't qualify as the dictatorial, pompous, corrupt pontiff as his predecessors and successors. For when he was Archbishop of Venice, he permitted churches to sell off their precious stones to raise money for the poor, and he suggested that the Western world's rich Catholic churches should give 1% of their annual income to the Third World. He didn't last very long. He was a pope for only 33 days. And in the British newspaper The Daily Mail, Thursday, August 27, 1998, it documented that a Brazilian archbishop who was his friend said that he was murdered. Michel Sindona was a Jesuit-educated Sicilian financial wizard nicknamed the Sharps, who was deeply connected to the mafia and was also a financial advisor to the Vatican. When he was arrested and incarcerated for financial corruption, he said he was going to expose everything about the Vatican and their financial corruption. He was poisoned in jail in March 1986. Roberto Calvi was an Italian banker closely connected to the Vatican, as can be seen by his picture with Pope Paul VI. He was the chairman of an Italian bank, Banco Ambrosiano, which collapsed in a big political banking scandal. He was also going to expose the corruption in the Vatican Bank and their connection to the mafia and Freemason. He died in London on the 17th of June 1982. At the time it was classed as a suicide. But after the family pushed for a further investigation, it was discovered that he was indeed murdered. And this is exactly the spot where his body was discovered. His moustache shaven and money stashed in his pocket. It still has a very eerie feeling around the location. But what is interesting is the name of this spot. It is called the Blackfriars Bridge, and the name is not a coincidence at all. Most are unaware that the papacy has not changed at all since the Dark Ages. Its leaders still dress the same, and it still influences world politics. And it looks like secular writers are making more of an alarm cry than those religious watchmen who are meant to forewarn. The late Fred Halliday was the Professor of International Relations at the London School of Economics from 1985 to 2008, who specialised in Middle Eastern politics. He was one of the very few intellectuals who not only saw the Vatican for who she was, and her dangerous liaison and unholy alliances with controversial states, but he wrote about the future repercussions of her global influence. In recent years under Ratzinger, and for years under his predecessor Karl Wojtyla, this overrated medieval entity has been allowed to play a role in formulating UN policy on matters of major import, notably birth control and use of condoms. It has also, in league with a peculiar and sexually repressive coalition of states, including the United States, Iran, Saudi Arabia and Qatar, promoted policies that, if carried through, will lead to the unnecessary deaths of millions of people. For those looking for such an entity, this is indeed an axis of evil. But the Vatican, the headquarters of the Catholic Church, whose religio-political government is called the Papacy, and under international law is recognized as the Holy See, knows who her biggest threat is. It is what severed half of the European continent from her that made them independent and free. And those who have the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God, as their offensive and defensive weapon, are those who the Papacy fears. Books that once filled the shelves are no longer in the libraries of the West. And if you don't know the past, then you won't know how to confront and deal with the present, neither prepare for the future. In one of the best documented works on the history of Christianity that covers Europe, Africa and Asia, Jean Lorenz von Moschim, an 18th century German Lutheran church historian, documents the papacy's biggest foe. The most important of all events that occurred among Christians after the 15th century, nay, the greatest of all events affecting the Christian world since the birth of the Saviour, was that celebrated religious and ecclesiastical revolution commonly called the Reformation. Has the Reformation died and was the movement insignificant? Wiley says the Reformation is not completed. Its work is but half accomplished. Completed the Reformation never will be till it has laid prostrate every idolatrous church, raised every dungeon, broken every fetter, emancipated every nation and tribe that dwell beneath heaven's cope, and assembled them all in one ransomed and glorious throng before the throne of the Lamb. The Reformation not only led people back to God, but men identified the papacy as the fourth beast of Daniel and the little horn that came out of the fourth beast, and the first beast or kingdom of Revelation chapter 13, who is geographically situated in Western Europe, which the prophecy identifies as 10 horns, horns symbolically representing kings and kingdoms. John Nevis Andrews, a 19th century North American missionary and Bible scholar, identified her as the first beast in Revelation chapter 13 and the whore of Babylon in Revelation chapter 17. Babylon is the name of the symbolic harlot which was seen by John. A woman is a symbol of a church, Revelation 12. A harlot is the symbol of a corrupt church, Ezekiel 16. It is evident that the woman in Revelation chapter 17 should be interpreted in the same manner as the one in chapter 12. If the harlot to whom the kings of the earth have unlawfully united themselves symbolizes only the Church of Rome, it follows that many of the wicked powers of the earth are quite free from this sin. The beast with 10 horns, described by Daniel, is also seen by John to ascend out of the sea. He is showing the identity of the papal power in Daniel 7 with the beast of Revelation chapter 13 verses 1 to 10. Despite its abysmal track record of thievery, slavery, colonialism and genocides, England is the home of the Protestant Reformation, and in the 17th century, Cambridge-educated Thomas Goodwin, who was president of Magdalen College in Oxford and the chaplain to Oliver Cromwell, came to the same conclusions as Jane Andrews through his deep prophetic studies. The Pope, together with the body of these 10 kingdoms joining into one, roughly becomes a head,
is that first beast with 10 horns described in this 13th chapter. And then the opposite company of the true church, who have the lamb for the head, are described in the 14th chapter. Now, the description of Antichrist, the Pope, and his false church, in his rise, power, greatness, and extent of his dominions, and of the company that should cleave unto him, is set forth in the visions of the 13th chapter, which afterwards in the 17th chapter the Holy Ghost himself interprets and makes a comment on. But Thomas Goodwin also reaped the benefits of the Reformation. For in Whitehall Gardens, opposite the Ministry of Defence in London, England, is a statue of a man looking over the very river that once secretly smuggled his Bibles from the continent to England. The 16th century Bible scholar William Tyndale. The English have no idea that this skilled linguist, versed in 7 languages fluently, delivered them from illiteracy and gave them the opportunity to read. He also said, "The Pope, that very Antichrist, O great whore of Babylon, how abuseth she the prince of the world? How drunk hath she made them with her wine?" But even 2 centuries prior to Tyndale, a man whose picture still hangs in the University of Oxford, which still shows his influence, was a scholar titled the Evangelical Doctor, the Oxford professor and godfather of the Reformation, John Wycliffe, who not only translated the Bible so the common man could read as his successor Tyndale did more successfully, but he also identified the papal system. John Wycliffe, called the Morning Star of the Reformation in one of his tracts, styled the Bishop of Rome the Antichrist, the proud worldly priest of Rome, and the most cursed of clippers and cut purses. The Bible describes the Antichrist as an apostasy in the church, and the best study is a PDF of J.A. Wiley that can be downloaded for free on the internet. The Bible says, "Little children, it is the last time, and as you have heard that Antichrist shall come, even now are there many Antichrists, whereby we know that it is the last time." Listen to the language very carefully. "They went out from us, but they were not of us. For if they had been of us, they would have no doubt have continued with us. But they went out that they might be made manifest that they were not all of us." The repetitive word that is used is us, which shows it is a spiritual corruption within the church. As the New Testament is written in Greek, the word anti in all classical Greek literature means to usurp, to substitute, or to take the place of. So the Antichrist is an individual or system who tries to take the place of Christ. The text continues. "Who is a liar but he that denieth that Jesus is the Christ? He is Antichrist that denieth the Father and the Son." How can you deny the Father and the Son by taking his place? Listen to the words of Jesus when addressing the religious hierarchy or priesthood of his day. "Then spake Jesus to the multitude and to his disciples, saying, The scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat, and call no man your father upon the earth, for one is your Father which is in heaven." Listen to Jesus' last prayer to God the Father, also known as the Ancient of Days, the Most High. "And now I am no more in the world, but these are in the world, and I will come to thee. Holy Father, keep to thine own name those whom thou hast given me, that they may be one as we are." Jesus specifically titles God the Father as the Holy Father. Now listen to how Peter describes Jesus. "And when the chief shepherd shall appear, ye shall receive a crown of glory that fadeth not away." Now listen to how Roman Catholic canon law describes the Pope. "In virtue of his office, the Supreme Pontiff is infallible in his teaching when, as chief shepherd and teacher of all Christ's faithful, with the duty of strengthening his brethren in the faith, he proclaims by a definitive act a doctrine
to be held concerning faith or morals. So the Pope not only titles himself the Holy Father, but also the Chief Shepherd, titles that belong only to God the Father and God the Son. And he qualifies for the prophetic description of the Antichrist. But the Jesuit order that the current Pope is a member of made a counter-interpretation to the Protestants that was rejected when it was published, but has gained ground since the 19th century, and the Jesuit Douay Bible is where the views were first expounded. In a book titled Antichrist and His 10 Kingdoms by Albert Close, it documents the two counter-prophetic interpretations of the Jesuits. Reverend G.S. Hitchcock, Doctor of Sacred Scripture, Rome, in his pamphlet The Beast and Little Horn, page 7, says, "The Futurist school, founded by the Jesuit Ribera in 1591, looks for Antichrist, Babylon, and a rebuilt temple in Jerusalem at the end of the Christian dispensation. The Preterist school, founded by the Jesuit Alcazar in 1614, explains the revelation by the fall of Jerusalem or by the fall of pagan Rome in 410 AD. We will focus on futurism. It was first embraced and expounded upon by the Italian Jesuit Cardinal Robert Bellarmine. No Protestant would teach it until Reverend S.R. Maitland embraced it in 1826. Then British Protestants like Edward Irvin, one of the pioneers of the modern so-called speaking in tongues movement, embraced it. John Nelson Darby, the Anglo-Irish Bible teacher who founded the Plymouth Brethren, embraced it. Samuel Prideaux Tregelles, English biblical scholar, textual critic and theologian, embraced it. The Anglican clergyman Ethelbert William Bullinger, and in the United States, Cyrus I. Scofield embraced it, and he expounded upon it in the famous Scofield Bible, the belief of a coming Antichrist and a rebuilt temple in Jerusalem, which has the biggest influence on most evangelical prophetic interpretations, which are seen in films like Left Behind and Jerusalem Countdown. Films such as the 1976 The Omen, The Lost Souls starring Winona Ryder, and the 1999 film The End of Days starring Arnold Schwarzenegger embraces the Jesuit futurism view, showing the future Antichrist against the papacy. And the Jesuits have become so successful at shifting the Antichrist emphasis away from the Pope that films like Nicolas Cage's Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance portray the Antichrist as a future demon.
I've made a lot of mistakes, but Danny's the one good thing I ever did.
That being the case, we better make sure he doesn't turn out to be the Antichrist.
As the entire world will eventually be deceived, the Vatican, as shown in a previous study, shows how she really feels about non-Catholic churches, not only once in the year 2000, but again in the year 2007. And those who still call her the Whore of Babylon, she pressures into submission. John Hagee, who does have some rather odd views, in 2008 supported John McCain during the United States president election campaign. But when he called the papacy the Whore of Babylon, McCain distanced himself from him, and Bill Donahue, the head of the Catholic League, told him to apologize to the Catholic Church, and he wrote a letter of apology to the Catholic Church recanting his position. Malachi Martin said, "The Vatican keeps a close eye on those churches who identify the papacy as the Whore of Babylon." Despite the mutual differences, for instance, between the Advent Christian Church, the Church of God of Abrahamic faith, and the Seventh-day Adventists, they are at one in opposition to Rome as the Red Whore of the Mediterranean. Given their separate and separatist perspectives on the world, in one sense these groups are uneasy allies at best, but there is good reason for them to be placed by John Paul in one command center. John Paul II is now dead, but his successor, Pope Francis I, who heads the First Kingdom, was named Time magazine's Man of the Year at the end of 2013. The International New York Times says his words are having an impact in the United States Congress. And you can see that he has the full support of the global media, who naively believe that his bubbly smile has changed the face of the papacy. When this chameleon makes its last and final change, the world is going to be in for a big shock.
We are the servants of God and the messengers of his justice. We are the instruments of his divine wrath on earth. We are called upon to cleanse his kingdom, bringing ash from the flesh of thine enemies.
So you get the picture. The Vatican has openly said that a new world order cannot function unless she controls it. And it's very sad that over the years, even ministers I know said, well, we don't really know if she's the last power in the book of Revelation, when she's openly said it. I've been called a conspiracy theorist by a pastor and a lay preacher in my own church. And it shows you the level of resistance this message will have when you present it to a world which is lost. But don't worry, we've already seen that they fear those who study the Bible. They don't fear secularization, because secularization is no threat to her. But if you really want to know how to stand, I suggest you follow this principle which I've been telling you for a long while. In the book of Acts chapter 17, there's a group of Christians in verse 10 called the Bereans. But what made the Bereans different from all other new converts to Christ was this, and listen to what it says in verse 11. These were more noble than those in Thessalonica, in that they received the word with all readiness of mind and searched the scriptures daily whether those things were so. So you need to be like a Berean. Anything you hear me say or present, go and research it. But even though the papacy is the most powerful institution on earth, she cannot control the world without the military assistance of another power. And that's going to be our next study, who the Second Kingdom is.